Yes, great. So
I do.
yes, so I chose this topic because, man, these agents I've been working with lately, holy moly. And from a buyer perspective, getting CDs last minute because come to find out the listing agent, didn't get the final water in time or didn't, do the, what's the word? What is it? All the last minute stuff for the listings. Okay. So, and what happens is, the buyers see like 2 CDs. Hi, Bob.
Hello, my friends.
How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
Good. So, wanted to just have this conversation to, really be the best that we can be to set ourselves apart from everybody else and to make your jobs easier. Okay. For those of you who just jumped on, the new rule is I want to see your face unless you're driving or super, super sick. I want everyone to be engaged here, right, Bob? We want everyone to get as much out of this as possible.
I love it. I love it.
Right?
I mean, and honestly, I mean, not only are you guys like, the #1 market center in like Quincy and Braintree and all that, but I mean, in sales, but you're also the best looking. So
I was
show it off, come on now.
Donna
#1
knows that.
real estate office.
Right, Donna? Yep. Awesome. All right. So first question is, what is a great listing agent?
Someone who gets it done.
Yep. What else?
Someone who stays in communication with their co-broke.
Yep. What else? Patrick, I can't hear you. You guys can put your mics on. There you go.
One who goes the extra mile.
Yep. What do you mean
One
by that? Give me an
listens,
example.
At the end of the final walkthrough, if the client has left cans of paint or other items in the house, that you're pretty much going to step up to the plate and remove those items, get them out, whatever you take them home with you, whatever you got to do with it, to put out a fire before you go to the closing table.
That's great. And that kind of plays with what Bill said too, like communication. So if you communicate to your seller and say, hey, listen, the cans of paint need to be gone, all these things need to be gone beforehand, then you don't have to be the one doing it.
Correct.
So be proactive.
Correct.
Yep. Mark, what were you saying?
Listens and listens and listens.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
What else?
I'd say a voice of reason, especially when things aren't going right.
Yeah.
On both sides, communicating with the other agent. Sometimes the argument can just be between the 2 agents, assuming what their client is or isn't going to do, and you end up having an argument between the agent when all they got to do is just go and ask the client rather than react. Things like that.
Right. So keeping your emotions between the lines, right?
Yep.
What else? Is everybody else on the call driving that I can't see? Sean, Bernice, Carol?
A great listing agent ensures that their client has a place to move to live. I've had some situations where I've inherited buyers because their listing agent didn't ensure that after they sold their home, they actually had a place to go to.
Wow. Yeah, I guess, a lot of times listing agents take the listing and then not even worry about where they're moving to. And sometimes the seller doesn't even think about that part of it, until they're like, oh my God, where am I going to go?
I got
What
another one.
else?
Keep your emotions in check. Sometimes when things start to go sideways, it's important to keep it professional, keep the emotions out of it, and work through the issue with the co-broke.
Yep.
I'm sorry if someone already said this already, but a good listing agent from where I'm sitting is somebody who's proactive in discussing where speed bumps might arise. So things in discussing with their seller, yes, I want you to get the most amount of money for your house, but we also have this fun little aspect called an appraisal that should that not come in, this is what's going to happen there. So I love when that conversation is had up front, so it's not as much of a surprise when I come in.
Right.
So on
Definitely.
top, just to expand on that, just continually to tell the, your client what's coming next.
Mhm.
Don't just think you covered it on the first meeting because they're gonna forget. So you want to keep saying, okay, here's the next step. Here's what you can expect next.
Right.
It's important to be proactive and preparatory, make sure you're prepping, and it's good to prep the buyer agent too,
Mhm.
to keep the buyer agent informed as to what's going on, say about, the appraisal, or I've ordered the smoke, I've ordered the water, the final water, just so they know that I have my act together.
Yep. Melissa, I could have sworn you were gonna say due diligence.
Yeah, due diligence.
Yep.
But also, you can't let, as far as diligence goes, and you also can't let that get in the way of your progress either,
Mhm.
One thing that drives me crazy, and it's just me, is when the offers start to come in and they're completely, just a mess, incomplete, handwritten, 50% of the paperwork isn't included, whatever it may be. You just have to stay calm and keep your emotions between the lines, and let the buyer agent know what to expect. If you think that their offer is looking good and it might be the one that's going to be accepted, call them up and say, hey, could you beef up your paperwork? I'm looking for this, that, and the other thing.
Mhm.
Don't chase them for paperwork at the end. Try to get it up front. Be proactive. Avoid hurdles. Basically, control the whole thing.
Right.
That's
Right.
what I do. I try to control the whole thing in a very polite way. At least I think it's a polite way.
And let's face it, I mean, we're gonna have to do the work of two agents sometimes.
Yeah.
The buyer's agent will have a masterminds about the buyer's agent, but a lot of the times you're gonna be doing the buyer agent work too if you want your transaction to close.
Right.
Right? I mean, I'm closing on a property on the 16th. And yesterday the appraiser called me, who was supposed to do a desktop, asking for the purchase and sales. I mean, come on, right? So, sometimes they don't do what, they don't send out what they need to send out, or they don't get to you, in a quick amount of time. They won't send you their commission statement. You got to chase them to do that stuff. So just understand that you're just going to have to do the other side of it sometimes and just be comfortable with that.
Yeah.
What else?
I think from the get-go that a good listing agent will vet the buyer by talking to the mortgage originator.
Yep.
I mean, I just think that, getting that clarification right up front to make sure that they're good to go is important. Because I don't think all mortgage originators do necessarily a full, pre-approval.
Right.
The way that they should.
Does everybody do that when you're getting offers? Are you calling the mortgage broker and asking a list of questions to make sure that they have checked their credit, they've looked at their W-2s, they've verified employment, all of those things?
Absolutely.
100%.
You have to.
Awesome.
Every time.
And it's more important now than ever, you guys, especially with employment aspects. Like, someone can tell you that they have a job all day long, but if someone like us hasn't looked at their pay stubs at least, how do you even know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Melissa, this is probably a good question for you. Are you allowed to ask the buyer's agent what the buyers do for a living?
No.
Okay. Is in terms of like COVID, like did they work during COVID? Were they laid off during COVID?
That's a good question.
Thanks.
I don't know the answer to that. I know that I would rather defer all that to the lender and try to, politely squeeze it out of the lender without actually asking the question directly.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not, but I think that asking, I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, is their employment stable at the moment? Are they about their employment? I don't think there's anything wrong with that question, but once you start asking those personal questions, recently Anita Hill was talking about something as simple as, and Donna, maybe it was you who brought it up too, I'm not sure. Someone had said, when you're at an open house and you're just making conversation with your guests, so where are you from?
Yeah, that was me.
Like that now can be considered in some
Fair housing violation.
fair housing violation.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and they're out there, they're shopping. So I would just leave that question to the lender. Anything of the lender about employment, usually blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So,
And if you
Yeah,
have
some-
any questions on that, we are hosting another Fair Housing continuing education class this month for anybody that might be wondering whether or not they're asking the right questions or if anything they should be asking is within compliance. So
Mhm.
definitely attend that if you have not already.
Yeah, we'll get the answers to that. I mean, I've found sometimes now that the buyer's agents will just call me and say, you know, she's a nurse, he's this, you know, they have a very steady, they have a strong, employment. Because I think just because of the whole COVID thing, a lot of people getting laid off, the buyer's agents want to make sure that the listing agent understands that, like, they're not going to lose their job if, say, this whole COVID thing happens again. Well, not happens again, you know what I mean? But, if that thing starts shutting down, more people get laid off, etc. So.
Just one more thing about fair housing. I mean, if you're gonna ask questions about a buyer, you should ask it of all the buyers then. You can't just pick and choose, because that could be a violation. And there are testers out there. So you can't just say, I decided to just do it with this person, but I didn't do it with the next person. Why not? What was the difference? It may just be an innocent situation where you might just think of doing it or didn't do it, but consistency is important.
Yeah, always
On
do the
that-
right
on that
thing
note,
there.
On that note, I think if you're going to ask a question, I think just make sure that it's a question that you're asking with a result or goal in mind, right? So what if the person said they work for a nail salon, right? And or what if the lender said that they work for a nail salon, and is your answer at that, or is the result going to be at that point, okay, so this offer's out just in case we get shut down again, because we know nail salons will be closed. But the next person up, if the answer is no, we're still going to entertain the offer, then why did you even ask the question? So don't just ask questions to ask questions, because you could get in trouble, number one. And if you end up getting in trouble for asking a question that the answer didn't even matter, why even ask the question, right?
Mhm. Right. All right. So what do you do to make sure that your clients feel like you're being a great listing agent from the client's perspective? Ooh,
I communicate weekly with them in terms of activity on the property.
mhm.
yeah,
Phone call,
yeah.
Bill?
What?
Is it a phone call? Is it a text? Is it an email?
It's kind of all the above. I carry a running document of all of the showings, individual showings, open house activity, that sort of thing. And I send that out on Monday morning to them. And then also, reach out to them, just to see if they have any questions or want to discuss any of the activity. So it's all media.
Okay. Do you ask your clients up front how they want to be communicated with, as far as
Sure.
like texting, email, phone calls?
Yep, what their preference is.
What else?
I try to set those expectations in the beginning. I think, some of us in the group are mind readers. Some of us are better at it than others. Some of us develop the skill over time, but I know for me, when I meet with a client for the first time, I try to get a sense of what to anticipate, what their personality is like. And there are lots of different ways that we can do that. But overall, over time, as you experience transaction after transaction, you're honing your perception skills as well as your technical skills, right?
Mhm.
So I always talk with them in the beginning about the first question I may ask them, even just at a consult, whether it's a buyer or seller, is what would make this a really great transaction for you? And I also ask them, have you bought and sold with a realtor in the past? And if they have, can you tell me about that experience? Because you want to know what was really difficult for them the first time and not repeat those patterns. So you don't want to make assumptions. But definitely in the beginning, it's important to really communicate a lot and get a sense for what they want. And they may eventually say to you, don't call me until you have an offer, or, can you call me every day? Because I'm really nervous about this, that, or the other thing. I have a seller right now who's worried about, the location of a septic plant. So it's, you have to know what your client's triggers are, and the only way you're going to know that is if you start asking questions. So to Bill, to your point, you have to just ask, call, talk, email, text, communicate with them as much as possible without being a pain in the neck. And you have to stay calm and not be the nervous one. Let them be the nervous one.
Right. And those are great questions that Melissa just, said to us. So I hope you guys wrote it down. Another thing, and Bill and I just talked about this, I think yesterday, what are you looking for in an agent? They'll tell you, I want someone that's going to call me every single day. Okay, well, if you take that listing, you better call them every single day. If they say, I just, want you to call me once a week because I'm at work and I don't want to be bothered, don't hound me, then call them once a week, don't bother them, don't, right? So ask them what they want, because we assume that they want certain things based on how we work, but it doesn't mean that's how they want us to either communicate with them or work with them. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, one size doesn't fit all.
Exactly.
Everybody's got their own specific requirements, and you need to tune into that because they're probably going to provide you information to help you win the listing.
Right. Because at the end of the day, we obviously want to do a great job. We want to get to the closing table, but aren't we also looking for, raving fans, referrals? Let's stand out. I'm going to say it again because more people joined, and I know I'm going to be a broken record, but if I can't see you, can you please put your cameras on unless you're driving or you're super sick? We want everyone to be part of this mastermind, and, thanks, Bernice. Well, you're driving, so you get a pass. I just don't want anyone to get in a car accident if the camera's on. But we want to see you guys. We want everyone to be part of this. We don't want to just have Bob and I talk all the time, right, Bob? All right. What else? How else do you make sure that your clients feel like you're being a great listing agent besides communication and asking great questions?
I think that, I don't know, maybe there's a few psychics on this call here today, but I think being able to tell the future, I think, is really important, right? And this goes along with communication. It's not about reacting to everything that comes up and that's you providing great service. It's, after the offer is accepted and before the home inspection, you let your sellers know that, hey, chances are pretty good, even though the house is in perfect shape, they're going to come back with a few things. It's natural. You're going to do it when you buy your house, and it's not personal. So just be ready for that. You put the house on for $499.9 and it goes for $535. Having that conversation with the sellers. Yeah, we can pop the champagne here, but we also have to get through the appraisal. And, if the appraisal does come in low, what are we going to do about it? And I think that's a real fair conversation to have. It can be an uncomfortable conversation to have if you allow it to be uncomfortable, but, just keeping their eye on the ball, knowing that even if the appraisal comes in at $499 or at $510 or whatever the number is, we still got top dollar for your house, and coming up with a plan on that. I'd even say extensions, are, something you should be talking with your sellers about. Not so much on the commitment date, but if it's a 30-day commitment date and it's a 45-day close and the client's using, a big, mortgage company or a local bank, you can know that hopefully, fingers crossed, the buyer's going to get their mortgage commitment, 30 days out. But if it's not, and they ask for an extension, I'll ask questions, but it's most likely going to be okay. It doesn't mean that anything real bad is going to happen, especially with a closing date. And then just having those last minute, and this is all about communication, right? But having that, last minute adjustment sort of thing nailed down. Chris, and you and I have talked about this before, but, there's no reason to be, pulling into the closing on two wheels with a, $500 oil adjustment in hand, giving it to the attorney at that point and expecting the buyer to cut the check. We can get that to the sellers or to the buyer's attorney, the bank's attorney, real quick, much earlier than we normally do, because that just creates waves that aren't needed, especially in the 11th hour.
Right. Yeah. And, as far as like final oil readings, that was the other thing I couldn't think of earlier. My brain just stopped. Final water, smoke detector certificates, those things should be done in a timely manner. to be able to give the attorneys and the buyer's agents enough time to get things done. If we're giving those things to the attorneys literally the day or two before closing, then, you know, that CD is not accurate, right? Which we all know the first CD that goes out isn't accurate. And now the buyer really doesn't know how much money they need to bring to the table. And then let's say, okay, they already reviewed the CD. Now a $1,000 oil adjustment comes in. And what if the buyer doesn't have the money? You know, or maybe they, you know, they can't go to the bank now because the bank's, the closing's really early, whatever it is. It just makes the end of this great transaction very frustrating for everybody. You know, we'll talk about this when we talk on the buyer side. There's a lot of agents that don't even tell their clients that if they're buying a house with oil, that they'll have to pay the difference in what's left in the tank. And then again, what happens is the listing and buyer agent are, you know, getting into it last minute when, you know, the buyer's agent either didn't know about it because they didn't know the process or didn't communicate with their client, or they're paying for it. So, you know, I think a lot of it is to know what the steps are in selling a house, what you're responsible for, what the timing is, and do it in a timely manner and not be running around last minute in chaos.
Yep,
And that goes
exactly
along
what
with
you just
being a
said.
good buyer's agent too, you know, I mean, you know, if the house has oil heat, so reminding the seller, you know, the seller's agent a week out even, because it does just create, you know, unnecessary drama, or it can, you know, because people always think that they're getting screwed, right? You know, my mortgage guy's going to screw me. I'm paying my realtor too much. What did this attorney even do during this whole transaction? And then they get to the closing and their bottom line has increased by $700. And yeah, we can defend it, but it's the impression, right? It's hard to shake that feeling.
But most of the time they yell at us for that.
They do.
So
Yeah.
that helps you guys.
Their closing, my closing cost just went up $700. I'm like,
Right.
yeah, I need a new suit, you know?
They're like, well, call the mortgage lender. Look what they did.
Right.
Well, the other thing
Thanks for
too is as a
taking the
listing
bullet.
agent, talk to the buyer's agent, say, have you discussed with your buyer that they will have to reimburse the seller for the final, you know, for the oil left in the tank at closing? Just ask, you know, just cover yourself with that stuff. I mean, you know, as you guys know, I'm selling my parents' home and I'm the listing agent too, which I know kind of, you know, you get a fool for a client kind of thing, but you know, whatever. And the buyer's agent that I'm working with literally is doing nothing. I am doing everything. And as a listing agent, when it's not my house, fine, I'll do it. But now that I'm paying the commission on it as the seller, wow, it's very eye-opening to me now, you know, because it is a lot of money. I'm like, I'm giving him all this money for what? I mean, he needed an extension and he texted me and said, hey, we're gonna need an extension. Can you get the paperwork taken care of? Because it's gonna be easier for me. Not only my listing agent, the seller, you want me to send an extension? Y'all look asking for the extension. So, I mean, until you sell your own house and pay out a commission and be a listing agent and see how it works, it's wow, it's mind blowing to me. That's why I wanted to have this, you know, mastermind with everybody, because I can imagine what these sellers are thinking, like paying out all this money for what? You know, we
Yeah,
get
when they
to
pay
prove to
you.
them that we deserve it. What's that?
Yeah, when they pay us.
Right, exactly. We got, yeah,
Kristen,
we
I
have to
just
prove
listened-
to them that we are earning our money. You know, we, my Millbrook house, we were taking photos and they had their, you know, their trash cans were out and they were full. They were so heavy. And then him and I were like dragging him through the backyard so the photographer could take the picture. And of course, like, I don't go to the gym, not in shape. So I was like, oh my God, it was so much work. So I pull it back out, you know, pull him back in and he's like, well, you're really earning your money, aren't you? You know, like kind of, you know, he's a funny guy. He's a jokester, but I mean, you know, you want them to see that you are doing things that, you know, others may not do. That was just like a
Kristen.
little example. Yeah.
Yeah, I just went through the exact same thing that you described.
Yeah.
I had to sell my family's home, which, you know, was a hard enough thing for me to do.
Yeah.
The co-broke did absolutely nothing, like zero the entire time. She showed up for the showing and she showed up for her check. She
Yeah.
wouldn't respond to anything. Every time I asked her a question, you know, it was awful. It was awful. And I was like, that was painful. I had to pay that commission. And I'm
Yeah.
like, really? You did nothing. But
Mhm.
whatever.
I
You
know.
know,
So I get it. Yeah.
that's where too,
really made
some
me
people don't know any
think of
better. Oh, sorry, go ahead,
No,
Linda.
no, I'm done.
I
Yeah.
just think, you know, some people, we can assume that maybe they're lazy, but they may not know any better either. I mean, you know, something like this, what we're doing right now is really commonplace for this office. And you guys have, I mean, look at your training calendar. It's jam packed. People don't know how to be a good buyer's agent. Maybe, I mean, they do think that I found them the house, we signed the purchase and sale, tell me when to show up for the check and I'll be there and I'm going to race to the bank and cash it, you know? And they don't know really what it takes to get to that next level as far as being a professional goes and creating raving fans and all that stuff, you know?
That's a good point. I don't know.
But even the people that have been in business a long time, you'll assume that they will do the right thing because they've been in the business for 30 years. Nope,
Right.
that's not the case either.
Sometimes it's worse because they can get
Yeah.
away with, and it doesn't matter if they're going to get paid anyway, you know?
Right. Yep.
Rich Landon and I from time to time run on the education schedule, how to be a great co-broke.
Yes, that's a great class, by the way.
Thank you. I actually love to teach that class because it's a great refresher for me, as well as great questions from the attendees who are in the class or on the call. So I'll see if we can't get that on the calendar for December. And, you know, we cover everything on the seller side as well as the buyer side. And honestly, those two sides really mirror each other very well. But the basics are everything that we're talking about, you know, proactive, know how to communicate everything. I think one thing that's also important is if you don't know the answer, don't make something up. If you know the answer, tell them, you know what, I don't know, I'm going to check and I'll get back to you right away. As soon as I have the information, or, you know, whatever the appropriate answer is. So just be responsible and be accountable. That's how you get it done. Be responsible and accountable.
And be honest. And it goes back to, I think Bob was talking about, I'm not even sure now. But, you know, being honest with your clients, you know, when it comes to like the process or what they owe on the property, things that are uncomfortable for people to ask, you know, how much do you owe on your property? We may have a lot of those short sales coming back up now, or bank owns, for those of you who have been through this before. And that's like the number one question you ask, because you have to know if they have to come to closing with money or if they just aren't going to be able to sell it, you know, or it's going to end up being bank owned. So you need to know those things. And, you know, we're the professional, they're hiring us to help them through the transaction, but we do have to be honest and have those hard conversations. And you know, make them feel okay about them too, because, you know, you can't do your job 100% if you don't have the answers to a lot of questions that you need. Does that make sense? Right. What do you do to make sure that your co-brokes feel that you're a great listing agent?
You get everything done.
Yep.
You know, you have your smoke search, you have all the things, you have your commission statements, you have all that up front and done. And especially the oil, especially the water. I mean, there's nothing worse than you know, 2 days before and they haven't done their job. They haven't done the final water. They haven't done, it just causes upset, you know, especially a smoke cert. I mean, you're not closing without that. So you better have that done at least 2-3 weeks. I try and have all mine done 30 days before the closing.
Yep.
Way before the commitment letter. I don't even care about the commitment letter.
Yep.
On the other side, that's $50, $60. I don't care about that. That's always done. And I personally go to every smoke inspection myself. I don't send anybody out there because I know how to do it and I want the job done right. And if you don't do it right, you're doing everybody a big disservice.
Yeah. And the last thing you wanted to do is the smoke cert to fail because the sellers bought, you know, detectors on Amazon and they're not compliant with, you know, the mass laws. And then now they're booked up, depending on what town it is. You can't get another appointment for like 3 or 4 weeks and you're supposed to close like tomorrow.
I change all the smokes over myself. I just do it. I bring a drill with me. I've been doing it for years because I know what can happen if you don't do it right. I go the morning of or 3 days before, make sure it's all set. I go the morning off, half an hour before the fire department, just give them one more try. You know what I mean?
But save the number, Pat.
What's that?
I'm gonna save your number.
Yeah, that's for my listing.
Look all this business you're gonna get now, Patrick.
Yeah.
I think that the listing agent would definitely want to be able to manage the listing by really, I don't like to use the word control the clients. I'll say manage the seller, because I have a situation where I feel that the listing agent isn't really like the dog. What is it? The tail wagging the dog. I feel that's what's happening. Every time we try to, for instance, we have an asbestos issue in the basement, and he doesn't seem to want to confront the seller about that issue. There's a pipe that needs to be fixed, a sewage pipe, and he's just like kind of vacillating back and forth. And I'm just like, who's the listing agent, you or the seller? Excuse me, yeah, the seller. So I just think that you really want to be able to manage the transaction and manage the seller. And I was the one that had to call the asbestos companies to see if we can get the asbestos abated out of the basement. I'm looking for plumbers, and I'm just like, he just doesn't seem to be taking the initiative to kind of manage the transaction.
Yeah.
So you want to communicate with the other agent. And so if you're the listing agent, you may just tell them, hey, appraisal's done. This got done. This got done. And then hopefully they in turn will tell you what got done. But I would be consistent there. And that's part of communication. And it's always a good thing to do. I do that. I'll let somebody know if something happened.
Yeah, and then they'll text you back like, woohoo, and then it makes you feel good because you know they're happy and great, you know?
Yeah, I think a good way to look at this too, in terms of how to be a good co-broke is, you know, golden rule, treat people the way you want to be treated. You know, don't condescend. If, you know, the other agent's starting to slip up a little, just be respectful and you know, understanding and helpful. Again, you never know what's going on in on their end, but yeah, just I like to. My biggest thing is communication. I appreciate an agent that communicates stuff. If a problem arises, let's talk through it. Don't keep it a secret, and then I find out a week or two later.
Yeah, and again, it comes back to, you know, keeping your emotions between the lines. I mean, especially if you've got a seller that's like flipping out on you. You can't put that on the buyer's agent, right? Because then the buyer's agent's telling the client, the seller's crazy, the listing agent's crazy, then they get mad, and it just ends up being ugly. And then when you need an extension or something needs to be done, or, you know, something didn't get fixed that was supposed to, you know, they're not going to give you any leeway because of the whole drama that happened before. So, you know, you really need to be respectful of the buyer's agent. And even if they're being really hot about something, because maybe their client's the one that's all over the place, you know, you need to say, listen, we're the agents here. We need to keep calm. You know, we both have the same, you know, our client, my seller wants to sell, your buyer wants to buy. Let's just figure it out and get through it instead of screaming at each other. And, you know, because sometimes the agents feel like if they get really heated and screaming and cause problems, that they're doing their job. Like they're being a great agent, you know, and that just makes things worse.
Right, they're not if they're killing the deal. I'm looking back at the handout that Rich and I used for the How to Be a Great Co-Broke class. And the first thing for both the buy side and the sell side is don't make decisions for your clients. They need to have their own. So that's why, you know, you're screaming and yelling or getting up on your high horse, thinking that you might be doing the best for your client. You're really not. You know, you might be killing the deal for them, and you're expressing likely what's important to you as opposed to what's important to them.
Yep, definitely. That's definitely something we want to talk about, Melissa, on the buy side, because, you know, I've had listing agents say to me, well, they're never going to accept that. Well, why don't you ask them?
Right.
You don't know. That's not your decision to make. You need to ask them.
Right.
You know? Yep.
It's one thing to say, I'm not sure if they will, but I'll check with them and get back to you.
Of course, because things can change. You know, they may have told you at the listing, there's no way I'm taking this price. And then after they've been on the market forever, and then, you know, they get off like, all right, I'll take it. You know, things change, you know?
I think also, a good point to cover with the other agent is ask the question. I mean, if you feel that it's getting heated or there's a chance maybe this is going to fall apart, doesn't matter if you're asking the buyer agent or the seller agent, ask, what's it going to take to get this done for your client? And then understand what the expectations are and lay it out for your client. And, maybe they're fibbing, maybe they're, putting their own priorities in front of their clients, but it's important to ask that question. I have a transaction happening in Weymouth at the moment, and the buyers asked for a large concession based on home inspection findings. And at least to the sellers, it was a large concession. It was a few $1,000s. And when I said to them, okay, well, what's more important to you, the price that you receive or the principle of giving the buyers a concession that they're asking for that you would never have asked for yourselves if you were in this situation? So they came to a logical decision of, if we go back on the market, that means, we'll be past the election, and we don't know what's going to happen with employment and lockdown. And, oh, by the way, we have another mortgage payment that we'll be responsible for. So there goes any savings that I could potentially achieve if I go back on the market, but that was counting on getting the same price that the prior buyer had agreed to. So, that's another way you can be a great seller agent, is to understand what the consequences are if the deal does fall apart and you have to go back on the market. What does that look like? What's the landscape? Help your sellers make a logical decision as opposed to an emotional decision.
Yeah, what's best for them,
right?
Not for you.
Right.
Not because you want a commission. Your commission should never be a consideration when you're, dealing with offers and seller concessions or things like that. If you do the right thing, you'll get paid. But don't make it about your commission. If you've got a, and I'm sure you guys who've done multiple offer situations, you get one that's low, a bunch that are about the same, and then you've got like this crazy high one, but if there's like a higher one and, the lending is just, you've never even heard of them, it doesn't even say that they were pre-approved, maybe even call the lender and like, oh, we haven't done anything yet. I haven't checked the credit. I haven't done any of that stuff. Don't try to sell it to your seller that, well, this is the better one because you're going to be getting more commission. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, I know we would never do that, but
I think with that, Kristen, is if you find yourself, I guess I talked to my team about this. It's, give yourself a hope check once in a while, right? Where when you're talking with your clients, is the information you're giving them based on you hoping things are going to work out? Like, or
right.
Do you have a plan that's directed, and that's the best way for me to describe it. Cause I know I can catch myself, falling into that trap in every area of life, never mind just business, but, is what I'm saying now coming from me just hoping it's going to work out, or do I have a strategy to get there, and if, and you can't base your business plan on hope,
Right. I like that.
Yeah. Hope is not a plan.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's nice, but it's not a plan.
Has anybody on the call, does anybody on the call have a client right now that basically you were connected with when you were on the other side of a transaction before? So let's say that you were the buyer's agent, and your buyer bought someone's house, and then 5 years later, the people that were selling called you because you impressed them so much compared to what their listing agent did, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So a lot of people, and we find that a lot. One of the first questions we ask our clients that's referred to us is, how did you meet so-and-so? And to me, that is like the epitome of creating a raving fan, right? Which is our mission on every transaction with every client that we have. You impress them so much that they weren't even your client, and they're calling you to work for them. I just think that's that is really the best compliment, I think.
Yep, definitely.
Hey, Bob, this is Bernice. I'm sorry, I'm not sure of my face because I'm driving. But I just want to speak to what you just said about having a client. I don't have a client, but I've earned referrals from attorneys from doing that. Just how they see how I work on the opposite side. and then they referred me to their clients, like, hey, I think this would be a good agent for you to work with. And I have
Nice.
quite a few of them, you know, just by, you know, being a good agent on both sides. And I think that's important too when you think about your clients in terms of buyers and sellers. There are other people involved in the transaction that could also potentially, you know, turn out to be raving fans. I love that phrase. That's awesome. So yeah, I just wanted to share that too. It's not only your buyer seller clients, but also the other folks that are involved in the transaction too, who are watching and paying attention how you're handling yourself throughout a transaction or a deal.
Yeah, Bernice, that's like a great segue, because my next question was, how are you tracking to see if you're being a great listing agent? And if you're getting referrals from the other side, then you're being a great listing agent, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
How else can you track?
You know, one thing that I was just thinking about, I don't know if, does your CRM or people on the call, do your CRMs allow you guys to input the contact information for the realtor working on the other side? And the reason I just bring that up is because if you were able to do a quick search in a multiple offer situation or a competitive market like we're in now, if you're able to call that broker and say, hey, you know, it's Missy Garlisi, man, it's been a while, but you know, a couple of years ago, I remember working with you on the 123 Main Street listing you had, and that was a great transaction. And I think we worked together before on like 46 Main Street too. I have an offer coming in, can't wait to do this again. What's important to your sellers, you know? And I think in that regard, you're going to have that's a much warmer intro than, you know, did we work together before or something like that? Because it's a small fishbowl that we work in, and we're all working with each other over and over and over again. And we know who we want to work with and who we definitely don't want to work with. But sometimes it's important that we remind people that they want to work with us, you know, that they've had a good experience in the past.
I
Melissa,
think I'm sorry, go ahead, Chris.
no, go ahead, Mark. Go ahead.
I think a great way to kind of determine if you, or track it is, for instance, in a condo association, if you list, you know, a property or in the condo association and you get other listings from that association. So I've gotten numerous referrals from other neighbors and even the head of the condo association. And I actually listed his property and sold it. Same thing for a home. Maybe you're selling a home and then maybe the next door neighbor or someone hears about you, someone comes to the open house that's in the neighborhood and you sell their house. I think that's a great way to track it as well.
Yep. Perfect. Yeah, Melissa gets a lot of those. I've talked to a lot of agents like, oh my God, we worked with Melissa. She was great. You know, from other co-brokes have said that.
Try.
No, you do.
I try.
But I mean, that's a good way to track it too. If you've got, because you know, everybody wants to be negative. They're never going to say anything nice. So if someone else is saying, if a co-broke from another company saying something nice about you to somebody else, that's huge. And you know, it makes it a lot easier from the listing agent's perspective, especially when you are being a great co-broke with everyone, because when you've got those multiple, or even a buyer's agent really, because when you're getting multiple offers, you know, you're going to look at the agent on who you want to work with, who's going to get it done, who's not going to, you know, pull the deal, you know, a couple of days later, they just put the offer in to give themselves 10 days to decide if the buyer wants it or not, you know, but, you know, with being a great agent and knowing the other great agents, it can make, you know, your transactions so much smoother.
Definitely. Yeah.
How else can you track? So referrals from condo associations, from other vendors. We've got, you know, co-brokes talking about how great we are. What's that?
I'm sorry, ask for reviews or testimonials. Ask
for reviews or testimonials. Yep. Who's doing that, by the way? That's like my biggest weakness.
Yeah, I used to.
I overthink it, I think.
That's like the key to my success is my reviews.
Yeah.
I make sure that Zillow, or, you know, there's a lot on Zillow, but most importantly, Google is important as well. Because when people Google you, they see 5 stars, even if it's just 5 reviews. The other thing that I've done, which has helped me tremendously, is I get video testimonials. So I have my clients at the end of the transaction, can you do a promotional video for me? And then that way, can I post it on social media? I get a lot of referrals that way.
And then they get their 5 minutes of fame, right, Mark? That's awesome. Yep. So reviews are a big thing.
Yeah, I think the other thing is if you're working with somebody and you impress them so much that they end up sitting with Alicia or, you know, a TL, or I think I saw Sean on the call earlier, you know, to come and learn more about Keller Williams, you know, that to me is the ultimate form of, I guess, gratitude and appreciation.
That's very true. That's very true. That actually happened with Nicole Condon. I did a co-broke with Nicole Condon, and she was like, we weren't even closed yet. She just kept asking me about Keller Williams, and I had just started here. So I'm like, can we just get through the transaction? You know what I mean? But, you know, she wanted to know what was going on over here, and she had seen that I was with the same company she was and moved over here and did more, you know, business when I moved over. And I didn't even know her. I didn't know her until I did that transaction. So, I mean, it is a good way to, you know, should I use the word influence, you know, agents to come and check us out and see what we're all about. If you're,
Just want to be,
not, I'm sorry, if you're not being a good, if you're not being a great agent, it's going to be very hard for you to convince people to come over here, because they're going to assume everybody in the company is the same. And that's so not true.
in Kristen's case with Nicole asked Kristen, so Kristen then probably engaged, but you don't want to bring it up during the middle of a transaction. It could be, may not be the best idea to bring it up at that point. You may want to wait till the end.
Mm-hmm.
Say, hey, you've been, and actually you could judge them to see if they've been a good co-broke, and that could be a segue in.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You
She
know,
was asking me at the home inspection at the close, and like, can we just talk about this later? I mean, I was new here. I didn't know anything anyways, but yeah, you don't want to, definitely, you don't want to start to talk to people about joining our company when you're in the middle of a transaction, or because what's going to happen is they're going to be like, oh yeah, sure, I'll talk to Alicia. Yeah. Just to maybe get their, you know, get their buyer's offer accepted, you know, or to make, you know, have their client get what they want, because you know that they're going to maybe, you know, talk to the team leader. It's just, it's not good. You know, you don't want them to think that you're, you know, there's something else going on. Work on the transaction, then afterwards, hey, you were a great co-broke, you know.
Let me ask, can I ask you a question on that? Because I was actually thinking the opposite. You know, nobody wants to be hard sold in the middle of this whole thing, especially when they haven't shown you any interest in moving at all. But, you know, what if you're, I mean, KW is a training company first, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, you familiarize yourself with the training schedule for that month, or at the very least, you know what the general themes are for the classes you guys put on constantly every month. And, you know, if you're talking with that listing agent or that other agent, and you know, you uncover some sort of pain, at that point you could though share with them your training calendar and say, you know, we have a class coming up on that next Thursday. I circled this on the map, on the calendar, I forwarded it to you, and you know, feel free to join us on Zoom if you'd like, you know, that sort of thing. I think in that case, I mean, I think that's pretty powerful, especially if someone's feeling pain, you know that there's a class coming up on it, and you share that calendar and they can see all of the things that you guys are doing as far as trainings go. And of course, they're going to think, geez, my company doesn't do that. You know?
But that's something you could bring up after, when you say you've been a good co-broke, and you can just mention that and then talk about the class. I think you're kind of, if you do it during the transaction, it could be a little bit of a slippery slope.
Yep.
Yeah, I think it all depends on your relationship with the person too.
True.
You know, if they are coming to you saying, oh my God, like all I do is work with buyers, I really want to work with sellers, oh, like I'm sick of buyers, whatever, you know, when you have a good relationship and you've been talking to them, you know, and you say, oh my gosh, you know, I totally get it. Actually, you know, we're going to be doing a class about listings. If you want to come, you're more than welcome to, like, no pressure, you know, just make it like it's not a big deal. So if that's the case, then yeah, sure. Invite them, tell them they can come on or do whatever. But you can't just go to them and be like, hey, I see you do a lot of buyers. You should just go to this listing class. Maybe they don't want to work with sellers, you know? So I think it depends on your relationship and, you know, what they how they approach you about that kind of stuff. But if they start saying things through the transaction, you know what their hot spots are, then yeah, after the transaction, you can say, hey, you know, we talked a couple times during the transaction, you had mentioned this, And I just got our calendar and we're actually teaching a class about that on this day. And you're more than welcome to come if you'd like. You know, I'll be there and whatever. So just come from contribution always. Don't come from,
Yeah.
you know, I always call it profit share breath. You know, come from contribution. What else?
I know we're wrapping up. One other thing I'll throw out there as far as, you know, seeing the future and being able to set expectations properly is if you do have a 30 to 45 day close, just remind people that things are going to come up. And because this is such a quick closing, everything's last minute, you know, so just be prepared for it. And so then that way, you know, when something does come up, even if it's minor turbulence, you can always refer back, oh, this is no big deal. Remember, we talked about that. Last minute things, turbulence, but that doesn't mean we're not going to land the plane safely. You're going to be just fine. Let's just knock this out. Okay.
Yep. Awesome. Anybody have anything else they'd like to add or ask? Don't be shy.
I did want to add, I ran into, when I was selling my home in Middleborough, just it's a small little thing, but the electric and the gas is called municipal, I believe.
Municipal.
And
Yep.
yes, yeah. And that was just something new to me. So if somebody didn't know about it, that you have to get that final reading or request it. That was just my 2 cents on listings.
Yes, good point. Again, that just comes back to knowing like what the steps in the transaction are. If like for Braintree, for instance, it is municipal. So because they have Braintree Braintree Electric Light Department, Beld. And when you have a closing in Braintree, the attorneys have to do a holdback, right, Margaret?
Yes.
Hold back on the for the closing on the seller side, and that money doesn't get released until Beld has said that yes, the seller has paid their electric bill in full. So
Yeah.
as a listing agent in a town that is municipal electric, you have to know that, you know, because your client is going to be sideswiped last minute if all of a sudden there's a holdback and they're like, well, what's going on? I didn't know that.
Right.
So again,
Thankfully, the attorney was great about it and said, you know, you need to get these things. And,
Yeah.
you know, I had to do my research to understand what it was because I didn't know about it. Just one of those little things on the list. You know?
Well, now you know, right? And that's
Oh,
great
yeah.
when you have an attorney that like knows the things, but sometimes you won't have an attorney that would know that either, right?
Right.
Good point. Good point. Yep.
That's right.
Awesome.
Also, we didn't mention septic. So down here in the country land, get your sellers to do septic.
Yep.
Get them to do septic right away, because I've had cases where, you know, a week before closing, they're doing septic and it fails and nobody's moving anywhere. All of a sudden. So
Yep.
get your sellers to do septic fast.
Yeah, that's huge. You know, do you have sometimes they think they have a septic system and they have a cesspool. I ran into that. And then next thing you know, they're paying $40,000 for a new septic system. The seller needs to know that ahead of time, because that's going to determine if they can even list the property, you know, or how much money they're going to get for the property. You know, some sellers feel like, well, it's a brand new septic system, I'm going to get more money. Well, the house has to have plumbing, right? Buyers don't care. They just want plumbing. So, you know, making sure that they do have it inspected even before you list it is huge. If they have to list it right away for whatever reason and they don't have time to do it, make sure you explain to them how important it is and why and what could happen, and so that they know if it does fail or they have to get a new septic system, they're going to have to pay for that. That's
Hey, Bob. Hey, Bob, can you chime in on that a little bit? Can people close on homes that failed Title V with some of your lenders?
So remember that, number one, if it's a family sale, you don't need Title V, period, right? That's my understanding. So generally speaking, mortgage companies don't allow non-weather related Title V holdbacks. Okay.
Everyone know what that means? Not, Bob, can you just say what non-weather related means?
Sure. So if the ground's frozen, the Title V can't be done. So in that case, just about every lender will allow for a Title V holdback, most likely 1.5 times the cost to do the work. so most would allow for that. But that really only happens in January and February, especially with the winters we've been having, where Decembers have been pretty mild, right? January, February. Radius Financial Group does allow for escrow holdbacks for Title V on all of our programs across the board. Basically, what we've done is just made the decision to lock our buyers' interest rate for an extra 30 days after the closing. And that allows us to hold the mortgage for a little bit longer. And then by the time we sell it to our investors, the Title V is done. They have to get it done within 30 days. So that can be paid for by the buyer or the seller. So just keep that in mind. But with just about every other mortgage company, and I promise this isn't like a Radius slant, every single mortgage company that I know of would require that you do a some kind of a renovation loan, either a 203K or something like that, if it was if you needed a non-weather related Title V holdback.
Mhm. Great question.
Okay,
And wells too, you know, if your seller has a well, you know, what if it failed? Like, you know, what if the buyer, because it happened to me, they did a water test and man, that was bad. We have to put a whole new, water treatment system in the whole house because the well was contaminated. So, you know, you could even suggest to your seller, let's get let's test the water before we list it. The more information you give them, you know, the better off you're both going to be. You don't want to like give them surprises last minute. Like, I didn't know they were going to test for well. Like, I didn't know I had, had to do this. Sorry, Mark. Yep.
How about getting a free title search
Mhm.
prior to listing? I've had two, actually I have three right now that are under agreement because we have title issues.
Okay. So are you the buyer side?
I'm on the buyer side, of course.
Okay. Yeah.
And they're not closing because of title issues.
Yeah.
I have
Okay.
one lady living in the house for a whole year because we're in land court because of an issue with the title.
Wow. Yeah. So as a listing agent, yeah, get that check the title first. We have, our two Lieberman and Carly Cummings, they'll do them for you for free. Get that. And you can bring it to your listing appointment and say, hey, look, I've already checked title. Everything's fine, blah, blah, blah. Or, hey, I've checked title and you have a lien from an electrician you didn't pay like 20 years ago. Like, did you know that? And get it cleaned up.
And that's where it's really important too. We get this all the time. I don't think this happens to you guys as much, but when a buyer has their uncle or friend or whoever who's an attorney, blah, 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 if that happens and they're not used to ordering title or reviewing title and they wait till the last minute and you have a last minute title issue. I mean, I think a lot of title issues, the ones that we come across a lot, missing discharges. I mean, if the title just came back in 2 weeks, we'd be fine. And if it was reviewed in 2 weeks, we'd be fine. But the issue is when it's not reviewed up until a week prior to the closing or something, and we have a title issue, it's a fair, if it was Crowley and Cummings or the attorneys that we use, Mike Baird, Jeff Formica, that last minute stuff like that won't happen as often, as it would be if we just let people use the attorney they want to use. I mean, we have to in some regard, but we can certainly strongly suggest otherwise.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Awesome. Well, was this helpful? Did you learn something today?
Yes. I'm going to be a great listing agent from here on out.
Yay, good job, Bob. So good. So I hope you found some value. I hope you got some good tips. I hope you got some ahas. I hope you're like, oh yeah, you're right, I should be doing that kind of thing. Next week, we're going to be talking about creating raving fans. I know we've had this topic before. However, with the holidays coming, and the winter time and, just setting yourself up for next year, I thought it would be a good idea to, have that topic again. I hope that you all will join us next week. I hope you'll all keep your cameras on so we can see your beautiful faces. And, think about that over the week. How can you create raving fans? Because I'd love to hear from all of you on, how you feel that you could create raving fans.
Hey guys, if you haven't heard that term before, that's a book. So if you're feeling extra ambitious, download it on Audible or whatever. If anybody still has CD players, I have a CD copy of Raving Fans here. You can swing by the office and pick it up. And but it's definitely it's a great book.
Awesome, great. All right, thank you everyone for joining us. Have an awesome week. Go get those listings.
See you guys. Bye-bye.
Right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Have a great day.
Bye.